So hello, my name is Glenn, and today we're going to talk about wage rises and basically why they're not rising. I'll put it in a little sentence. Basically, the federal government is trying to implement policies that are not allowing wages to rise. Globalisation, immigration, don't blame the immigrants, they're just trying to make their life better. And automation. Those are the three things that are actually affecting wage increases. I'm not talking about an increase with inflation, in which the actual rise in actual wages is actually not accounting for inflation, so it's actually usually lower. And a lot of cases since 2011-12 actually has not increased. Thank you, LNP. A lot of wages have pretty much been stagnant for those nearly 10 years. So if you get like $20 or $25 an hour, you're probably still on that wage 10 years later. And inflation in that time is about 30%, so you've lost 30% of your purchasing power. But inflation rate is excluding a lot of things like housing. But, 3% is just my default setting that I put on inflation. Some years they say it's lower, some years they say it's higher. I reckon it's higher. Like milk. Milk in the last year has risen 25%. Before the pandemic, used to go to restaurants, pay $40 for two people. $40. Now I go out and pay like $55, $60. So that's at least a 50% increase just in restaurants itself. So those prices have actually increased quite a lot. Unless you go to, what's the cheapest one I actually went to? Vietnamese restaurants increased the lowest that I have found. The ones run by Australians have increased the most because they probably pay the actual correct wage. So let's have a look at some graphs I have on the computer. So I have to turn the camera around and we'll see what is. Okay, so this is from the Parliament of Australia. So I would while this is supposed to be thorough, and it's also a year old, so they actually haven't got a newer one. You can actually find it from the web address, which is, if I adjust the camera up there. So this is the actual web address. Hopefully I'll remember to put a link down. So this addresses why wages are actually not increasing. Okay, so significant decrease in wage growth, so 2.2%, 45 years to December. That's every year. And if inflation is an average of 3%, then that's actually lower than the actual inflation rate. And 3.3% previous 3 years, so it's higher. Real number of wages significantly less than recorded for the previous period. Wage growth for women has been stronger than wage growth for men over the 5 years. That's a positive. And you got a lot of other information. So I actually like to go to graphs. I'm a graphics person. I love pictures. But here we go to the first table, and it has 45 years. Another 5 years, the actual wage growth. You can see in those 5 year periods, the wage for pretty much all sectors except for minimum wage has pretty much declined. The minimum wage is only 0.2 of 8%, which is not really a high thing for minimum wage, even though it's nearly $20. With the current prices in Australia, which are actually the highest in the world, the highest prices, so that would actually affect the actual outcome. Okay, consumer price index, so you got adults, full-time women, men, so you got wage increases pretty much over the 10 years the same in percentage wise, but if you're taking the total amounts, probably would actually add differently. And just remember, you can't actually pay women and men different wages. They should both be on the same award, so they should actually get the same rate for the same type of job that they're doing. That's been illegal since, I think, like the 70s. Okay, so what's the detail telling us about the actual wage growth? So the wage growth, just remember, all this information here is just taken from the graphs. So we've got private sector wage growth, 98 to 2018, it's a 20-year period. So in the 2000s, in the mining boom, it actually increased quite a lot. Private sector, public sector, and this is the total. So that line there. And they're pretty similar. So private sector wages during the GFC, so that's that drop there. And there will be a drop here for the 2020. Obviously the private sector decreased because, unemployment went up. So because unemployment goes up, there's a lot more people that they could employ, so they can actually demand that the employees just don't get a wage rise, or else we'll just hire someone else. So that is that graph. Then we go down, we got a lot of words. Movement in wages, inflation, and target cash rate. So we have wage price index, okay. So that is the pink. Then we have the consumer price index, so things that you actually increase in consumer prices. Interest rates and yields. So that is the cash rate. So you've got the information there. So as you can see, the interest rates dropped quite a lot, and it's actually dropped all the way down to here. Now, you got the consumer price index, so the actual inflation, it's, I put it at 3%. Obviously, they put it a lot lower for a lot of places. Yeah, I don't see that. Then you got the wage increases, which is the pink. And obviously, it has higher than inflation, which, yeah, I really don't think so. As you can see, this is actually the government, so a lot of this is actually not taken into account. Like the consumer price index doesn't take into account a lot of things, so that would probably be a lot higher if they were taken into account, but no, that's not. Okay, average annual wage increase for current federal enterprise agreements. So this is also part of the government problem. The government's actually trying to decrease the federal wages that are federally, and if they do that, then the private sector will actually follow. So if they reduce the wage increases to 1%, the private sector will probably put it a little bit higher than that, like 1.5%, because they want to attract those people into the private sector, but they're not going to offer too much more. So as you can see, 92 to about 2012-13, so when the Liberals actually got in, it's actually quite high. And this is a high inflation period here, and then inflation started to decrease here. And since the Liberals got in, they have definitely put a stranglehold on the public sector price increases. So, federal enterprise agreements. So that's the main problem with wage increases. So if the wage increases in the private sector actually were lower than the public sector, people will move to the public sector. But that's not the case. Okay, retail trade, you can see, okay, average annual growth in annual earnings. Men, women, and we've got all different farms. So 2%, yeah, I don't see any wage growth unless it's actually mandated by the federal government. So it's all actually quite low. And And we've got some more graphs here. Gender pay gap. Now this is not only pay, this takes into other things like especially the rearing of children and looking after elderly. That's probably the two major impediments of women earning more money. So, and it just goes on and on. Trend in unemployment. So, if you see the trend in unemployment and the actual wage rises were greatest here, and then since 2012 when unemployment actually gone up and underemployment, it actually has been trending down. So that's there's definitely a correlation there. In terms of trade, wage increases. So in terms of trade, it's been pretty flat. The wage increase has actually been lower. Mining, all industries. So this is the mining boom. And yeah, this is actually getting a bit off topic. So here is actually the actual wage freezes. So this is the actual share of firms reporting wage freezes. So here we actually have the actual problem with the GFC. And as you can see, the current and expected. So the actual current is actually lower than the actual expected. Usually the private sector leads pay rises over a quarter with wage growth of 0.7, seasonally adjusted, while public wages edges 0.3. Yes, so that's what I was saying before. The private sector would increase wages higher than the public sector just to attract those that are actually very skilled from the public sector to the private sector. Wage freezes have had an impact on the public sector. This is from the ABC. Recorded the lowest annual increase, 1.6. And she says that they were recovering from pay cuts and the strongest December quarter figures, with professional, scientific and technical workers booking 1.2 increase, having suffered a 0.5% fall in the June quarter. So you need to add all these up. So see, a lot of these will actually overlap with a company here, not increasing wages. But as you can see, with the actual recession, the actual wage freeze has definitely increased. And this is the actual recovery period. So that is when wage rises were actually probably the highest for that period. And pretty much since, so this is 11, 12, since this period, wage rise has actually shot up. Wage rise have decreased the same. And wages have been pretty much flat for that time period. Recruiters say payoff is improving. So that's a good article to actually read. And here we have a share of income from past 50 years. So here we go. This is the period of real economic growth and good government management since the neoliberals get in about 80s. Then we have a decrease in the share of income that the actual employers take, and I assume this is the actual costs of running a business. So the decline is attributed to technology, immigration, imports from China, end of the mining boom. So end of the mining boom is like here, but the ease of which Reynolds was trapped into the first rejection and then accepting of her ministerial, said flowed from the fact that Cormann had broken one of the standing conventions for policies in Australia, and that is a matter of unspeakable word. For more than 40 years, both the architecture of labour market regulation and the discretionary prices of government have been designed for the precise objective of holding down wages. So this is actually basically all you need to know. It's actually government policy to actually decrease wages. That's why they had globalization. So if you complained about your job, they just send your job to a cheaper place. Automation, they make productivity go up, but they don't employ more people, and they don't actually give you an increase in wages because of that. And what else? Imports from China, yeah, that's the offshoring. Immigration, so our immigration rate is actually quite high, about between 100 and 200,000 people from memory. At the moment, it's actually 0, but people are still not demanding an actual wage rise. They should actually do it now, but because the unemployment rate is actually quite high, people are actually probably not going to do that. But pretty much the actual growth in jobs is very high, and that is the actual reasons why wages are not actual growing. So what's the best thing you can actually do? Well, basically you can join a union. You can demand a wage rise. So how do we actually fix this? Well, there's basically a few things you can do. You can join a union. I recommend it. If you get in trouble at work with your employer, you can actually refer to your union and they could actually help you out. Demand an actual wage rise from your employer. I would suggest is that you apply for other jobs first. Make sure you're successful at those jobs, and if you accept the job, then you go back to the employer and say, oh, I've accepted the job. If you want me to stay here, I need a wage rise. If they say no, well, then you just go to the other job. If they say yes, then well, you just refuse the other job politely. Also, don't do work that is above what you get paid for. So if like if you make bread, then and you're doing 8 hours make bread, and then after that they want you to do extra stuff, just say no, that is actually not part of my job. You have to employ someone else to do that. Don't get me into it. So anyway, this is the actual video. I hope it actually covers some things up. I hope someone actually watches it, and just remember to demand a pay rise.